Good evening, I'm Jake Ward in for Joshua Johnson. Glad you are making time for us on this Thursday, July 14th. Here is some of what we're talking about tonight. President Biden is getting something on his Mideast trip that he is not getting much of here at home, and that's praise. But a scheduled visit to Saudi Arabia tomorrow could complicate things both here and abroad. Also today, the suspect in the Buffalo mass shooting has been indicted on federal hate crime charges. This comes just before the supermarket he targeted back in May finally reopens. Plus, Ivana Trump, the ex-wife of Donald Trump and the mother of his 3 eldest children, has died at the age of 73. And parts of the U.S. and Europe continue to deal with crushing heat. We'll examine how it affects the human body and tell you which economies may suffer or thrive in a changed world. We begin tonight with President Biden's trip to Israel. The president was in both Tel Aviv and Jerusalem today, where he met with Israel's interim prime minister, Yair Lapid. The main topic of discussion seemed to be Iran. The president wants to restore the 2015 nuclear agreement abandoned by the Trump administration in an attempt to curtail a nuclear program that has since resumed. Israel is not convinced Iran would even abide by the deal and is suggesting a tougher approach.
Words will not stop them, Mr. President. Diplomacy will not stop them. The only thing that will stop Iran is knowing that if they continue to develop their nuclear program, the free world will use force. The only way to stop them is to put a credible military threat on the table.
President Biden is scheduled to visit the occupied West Bank tomorrow for a brief meeting with the president of the Palestinian Authority, after which he will head to Saudi Arabia, a trip we'll talk about in more detail in just a moment. But let's stay with Israel, where he is getting the literal red carpet treatment, something he has not seen much of at home. A new CNBC poll has Biden's approval rating at just 36%, and his approval rating for handling the economy is worse than that. These are historic lows for the president. So the question becomes, can Biden accomplish enough on this trip to bring home some of the praise he's getting abroad? NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell has more from Jerusalem.
Good evening. President Biden heads into one more day in Israel before the next stop in Saudi Arabia. The time spent here in Jerusalem shows the friendship between the U.S. and Israel. And sometimes among friends, there can be some differences. And that was certainly playing out when President Biden and the Prime Minister talked about Iran, its nuclear ambitions, and the best way to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. President Biden emphasizes diplomacy. The Prime Minister said he doesn't believe words and diplomacy will register with Iran, won't make a difference. He said that country must know that the free countries of the world would use force to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon, threatening Israel's very existence. The president says that he believes military force can be used, but as a last resort. So they agree on objectives, but have some different views on how they might get there. The president was also asked about his plans in Saudi Arabia to talk about the killing of Washington Post columnist and Saudi dissident Jamal Khashoggi. The president in the past has called the kingdom a pariah for its human rights violations, including the killing of the journalist. He would not say if he intends to directly bring that up when he's in meetings with the king and the crown prince, but he said he always talks about human rights and American values. We'll have to see when he gets to Saudi Arabia if the Khashoggi case will come up directly. And certainly the president has a lot of issues on his plate there, and part of that is the complex relationship between the president, the United States, and Saudi Arabia. Back to you.
Tomorrow, President Biden heads to Saudi Arabia, where he says he'll be meeting with 9 different heads of state. And among those, of course, will be Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. That is the man the U.S. intelligence community says ordered the brutal murder and dismemberment of this man, Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. When asked if he would bring up Khashoggi's death on this trip, the president stopped short.
My views on Khashoggi have been absolutely, positively clear. And I have never been quiet about talking about human rights. The question that the reason I'm going to Saudi Arabia, though, is much broader, is to promote U.S. interest. Promote U.S. interest in a way that I think we have an opportunity to reassert what I think we've made a mistake of walking away from, our influence in the Middle East. There are so many issues at stake that I want to make clear that we can continue to lead in the region and not create a vacuum. I always bring up human rights.
That response is a far cry from the campaign trail back in 2019 when Biden took a much stronger stance.
Mr. Vice President, the CIA has concluded that the leader of Saudi Arabia directed the murder of U.S.-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The State Department also says the Saudi government is responsible for executing nonviolent offenders and for torture. President Trump has not punished senior Saudi leaders. Would you?
Yes, and I said it at the time. Khashoggi was, in fact, murdered and dismembered, and I believe in the order of the Crown Prince. And I would make it very clear, we were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are. There's very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia.
Joining us now is Rashid Khalidi. He's the Edward Said Professor of Modern Arab Studies at Columbia University. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
We, of course, remember that President Biden ran on the idea, in part, that he would make Saudi Arabia a, quote, pariah. He said he would never speak to Crown Prince bin Salman. So I guess I'm wondering, do you think he deserves to be criticized for going back on that and being in Saudi Arabia now?
Well, I think he does. The president said, as you say, that he would turn the Crown Prince into a pariah for a very good reason. He was found responsible by our intelligence services for the murder of an American citizen, Jamal Khashoggi. At the same time, the president seems to feel that going to Saudi Arabia will help him domestically because it might help him in terms of increased oil production by Saudi Arabia, and also because he wants to strengthen ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. So this promise he made has been left by the wayside for these two reasons.
Yeah. And I think of the past sort of political calculus, the talking points that we've heard from past administrations about being not just reliant on Saudi Arabia for oil, but also the feeling that there is somehow an alignment in the national interests of the two countries. But now we're talking, about the Saudis have, at this point, right, they kidnapped a prime minister in Lebanon, they backed a warlord in Syria, right? We don't feel as connected as we once did. Do you think the calculus has changed?
Well, it shouldn't have changed. I mean, you mentioned several egregious things that this government in Saudi Arabia has done. I would add to that the war crimes that they've committed in Yemen with American weapons in violation of U.S. law. There are many other things I could mention. We are talking about probably the most absolute monarchy on the face of the earth. We are talking about a country whose citizens have absolutely no rights. There's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of association. No unions are allowed. No political parties are allowed. There are no elections. And this is a country that actively fights democracy all over the Middle East. So when the president says that what we're doing in our foreign policy is to extend freedom and defend freedom, it looks a little peculiar. I mean, he's coming from a country, Israel, where over half the population lives under a system of legal discrimination. And he's going to a country where citizens have almost no rights whatsoever. So I think it makes a mockery of claims that American policy in the Middle East is based on human rights or any values other than naked self-interest, oil, and so forth.
So at this point, however, we're also looking at a moment when the war in Ukraine has upended the geopolitical landscape and changed our access to, changed the market for oil, for fuel, for energy entirely. I want to play a little bit of what Chris Coons had to say today about the reason for this trip to Saudi Arabia. Have a listen.
One of the things that has changed since the campaign has changed in recent months is that Russia is committing daily human rights violations, atrocities in Ukraine against thousands of innocent Ukrainian civilians. And one other thing that's changed is that the strain, the pressure on our key European allies and partners because of oil and gas prices continues to rise. I respect that the president made a hard decision.
You know, you and I are sitting outside the administration. We are not privy to the discussions or the pressures that they are under. Do you think that it is fair to be reassessing these prior campaign promises and these prior positions in light of just how difficult the global fuel supply situation is?
Well, I mean, if that's the case, let's drop the rhetoric about freedom and human rights. I mean, human rights violations in the Ukraine are egregious and horrific. The human rights violations committed by Israel, which the president just visited, and by Saudi Arabia are at least equally egregious. Israel's been in occupation of the occupied West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip since 1967. Ukraine has been partially occupied now since 2014. Somehow these two things are never mentioned. Saudi Arabia is engaged in a war which it has a puppet regime in Yemen. So I think if we're going to say naked self-interest, we need the oil. Fine. In that case, they should probably be talking to the Iranians, who could put several million barrels of oil onto the market per day. I understand why they might not do that, but it's a little hard to understand why Saudi Arabia, which has a regime most people find abhorrent, and Iran, which has a regime most people find abhorrent, should somehow be treated entirely differently here. If it's all about oil.
So, yeah, you can imagine a world in which if we were more honest and open about it in some way, then we might just buy the oil from Iran. I mean, you're looking at the past, you think of George Bush, forging an alliance with Saudi Arabia, Obama even offering at least a tepid endorsement of the war in Yemen, Trump fully embracing Saudi Arabia. Perhaps, I don't know, could we somehow come up with some sort of more honest calculus, do you think?
Well, if it's about oil, they both have oil. If that's really what it's about. I mean, the egregious human rights violations in Iran are something that we never stop talking about. Somehow, we don't find that a problem with Saudi Arabia, or for that matter, with Israel. So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy here. I think the hypocrisy starts with the president's campaign promises, which he simply has not kept as far as the Middle East is concerned. He's talked about freedom and security. Where is the freedom for Saudi citizens? Where is security for the Palestinians? Clearly, those are things that are less important than, in this case, oil.
Professor Rashid Khalidi helping us decode a very jarring trip by the president to the Middle East. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Ivana Trump, the first wife of Donald Trump, has died. The former president released a statement earlier today, writing in part, quote, "She was a wonderful, beautiful, and amazing woman who led a great and inspirational life. Her pride and joy were her three children, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. Rest in peace, Ivana." Earlier today, the New York City Fire Department said it responded to a report of cardiac arrest at Trump's Manhattan home. Trump was a former model. Born in Czechoslovakia, she eventually made her way to the United States, where in the late 1970s, she married Donald Trump. The couple divorced in 1990, but were reportedly on good terms in recent years. In 2017, Ivana wrote in her book that the two spoke once a week. Ivana Trump was 73 years old. Coming up, federal hate crime charges filed in Buffalo against an alleged shooter. This as the community prepares to reopen the grocery store where the mass shooting took place. And later, I mean, talk about a priceless selfie, a self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh found after more than a century. That's ahead. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. The man suspected in the Buffalo mass shooting is now being indicted on federal hate crime charges. Exactly 2 months ago, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron allegedly killed 10 people, all of them black, at a Tops supermarket. Now he faces 27 counts of hate crimes. Police found evidence this was a racist attack in a document that appeared to be written by the suspect. In it, he suggested that he targeted Buffalo because it had the largest black population near his home. Earlier today, AG Merrick Garland said the Justice Department, quote, fully recognizes the threat that white supremacist violence poses to the safety of the American people and American democracy. If convicted of the federal charges, the suspect could face life in prison or even the death penalty. Joining us now from Buffalo is NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda. Emily, tell us, first of all, about this indictment. As I understand, the suspect was indicted on many, many counts. Tell us about it.
Hey there, Jake. This federal indictment coming on the 2-month anniversary of that horrific massacre. The suspect now facing a lengthy list of charges, among them charges related to firearms and hate crimes. What's really notable here are the 10 counts of hate crimes resulting in death. Now the suspect could face, if convicted, up to the death penalty. The Attorney General calling this white supremacist violence. This all comes on top of the state charges, which have already been filed, and they include 10 counts of first and second degree murder. Jake, back to you.
It's really extraordinary that this is also happening on the day that the Tops supermarket is reopening. And as I understand it, there was a moment of silence for the victims there. I want to take a moment and just read their names out because, honestly, there are so many. We're talking here about Robert Drury, Margus Morrison, Andre McNeil, Aaron Salter, Geraldine Talley, Celestine Cheney, Hayward Patterson, Catherine Massey, Pearl Young, and Ruth Whitfield. You were there today. Tell us a little bit about the mood as those people were honored.
A lot of mixed emotions, a heavy day for so many people. It's a sobering reminder, really, of just how long the pain can linger in a community after just terrible tragedies that we witnessed, like this one in May. I've spoken with a number of families of victims who say this community will never be the same. What's particularly notable is the location of where this attack was carried out. This Tops supermarket behind me is really the sole major supermarket in the community. It's a largely pedestrian community. And so when this was closed for renovations over the past 2 months, it really cut off a major and important lifeline for so many members of this community. And that's why officials said that, you know, it was important to them to reopen its stores swiftly. 75% of the employees, according to store leaders and officials, will be returning to work here. Among them, Rose Wasaki, who was actually inside the store the day of the shooting. She says she barricaded herself in a back room, and really those memories, those moments have been etched into her mind. Take a listen here.
I wake up throughout the night. I haven't had a good night's sleep since this whole thing happened. It's terrible. It's just a nightmare. It's just a big old nightmare, and you do the best you can.
But she says she is determined to bring back access for this community to their fresh produce, and that's what helps her get through this painful transition. Still, a lot of people, the wound is too raw. A number of families of victims tell me they will not step foot inside this supermarket again, let alone drive down Jefferson Avenue, even drive by the store. They say they wish this store was demolished, as what we will likely see in Uvalde, Texas. Jake.
Thank you, Emily. And everybody, quick correction. Earlier I said Tops supermarket opens today. That's my mistake. It opens to the public tomorrow. The House of Representatives passed bipartisan gun legislation aimed at keeping you informed about shootings in your area. It's called the Active Shooter Alert Act. If it passed into law, it would create a communication system to alert the public about any active shooting situation as it's happening, kind of like an Amber Alert. Joining us now is Mike DeBonis. He's a congressional reporter for the Washington Post. I really appreciate your being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's talk first about what exactly this would be. How would it work, and how would it get a warning out to everybody?
Well, it's basically a version of the Amber Alert system, or the National Weather Service alerts, where you would get a push alert on your cell phone. The kind that is really loud and wakes you up in the middle of the night if there's a tornado about to hit you. That kind of alert that could be sent out by authorities when there's a credible report of an active shooter. And this is being pitched as just one way to help save lives in these unfortunately all too common situations that we see across America.
And is this really something that's going to, in theory, kind of replace the ad hoc systems we have now? Give us a sense of how much of an improvement this could be if it works as lawmakers intend.
Yeah, I mean, the current system is basically send a tweet, get it out to whatever channels, law enforcement is used to dealing with, local TV news, radio, broadcast media. And obviously people are not necessarily looking at the news, listening to the news, watching the news, even looking at their phones. This is a way to, in a very specific geolocated area, that authorities could target people, alert them, get them to take cover, flee, stay out of harm's way.
And do I understand correctly, this is intended specifically for mass shootings, or would this be for any incidents of gun violence?
Yeah, I mean, active shoot. It's the title of the law is Active Shooter Alert Act. It's about active shooters. Ostensibly, I suppose, authorities could use it for other purposes, but it's specifically about alerting people in a specific geographic area that there's an imminent threat and they need to take action.
And now let's talk about how this is moving through the halls of power. How did the vote go? What were lawmakers' reactions to it?
It passed on a solid bipartisan vote. There was a good deal of Republican opposition, but not overwhelming. It's going to go to the Senate now. The possibilities there are more in question. The Senate just passed a big piece of bipartisan gun violence legislation. There's not a big appetite, or any appetite really, to burn a lot of floor time on a bill of this sort of minor scope. What there is a possibility is that this could move by what's called unanimous consent, where all 100 senators agree just to move it, pass it into law, or it could pass as part of a big must-pass bill that could come along later this year, and it could sort of get tacked on. That's probably the most likely scenario here, but we're gonna have to see how that plays out.
And 2 days ago, Representatives Jay Paul and Curtis basically brought in a new piece of legislation that would be aimed specifically at gun suicides. I want to show you some statistics from Everytown, which has essentially found that over 24,000 people die of gun suicide every year. What exactly is in that bill, Mike, and how is it being received so far?
So it's basically a voluntary, sort of red flag law. We talked a lot about red flag laws when this Senate bill, this recent bill passed. But that allows authorities to, designate people who are deemed to be a danger and keep guns away from them. What this is a self-reporting function, where if you're going through mental health issues, you're having a mental health crisis, you can voluntarily go to authorities and say, I want my guns taken away for a specified period of time because I'm afraid I might hurt myself. And some states have these laws. Utah, where John Curtis is from, has a law like this. And there's a decent amount of bipartisan support for this, but this was just introduced. There hasn't been a hearing. It's possible that this could move through the House later this year in a similar way. But, that's not imminent.
Washington Post congressional reporter Mike DeBonis, thank you so much for making time tonight.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
In a moment, we'll bring you today's other top stories, including charges filed against a man accused of raping and impregnating a 10-year-old girl, how this tragic case became a legal and political firestorm, and a record heat wave continues in both the United States and Europe. We'll learn how it can shut down the human body and also whole economies. Plus, this Monday marks World Population Day. Human life on Earth is growing and shifting in surprising ways that you'll want to know about. The director of the United Nations Population Division joins us later this hour to explain. Today, and this is a very difficult story, police say a man charged with raping a 10-year-old girl, getting her pregnant, has confessed.
She was forced to have to travel out of the state to Indiana to seek to terminate the presidency and maybe save her life. 10 years old. 10 years old. raped, 6 weeks pregnant, already traumatized, was forced to travel to another state.
President Biden brought attention to this case last week when signing an executive order to protect abortion access. The child was denied an abortion in Ohio and forced to travel to Indiana for the procedure. Now, Ohio is one of the many states that implemented an abortion ban. It went into effect just hours after the Supreme Court overturned Roe. It bans abortions at around 6 weeks of pregnancy. The only exceptions allowed are those cases where the mother's life is at risk. Joining us now is NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. It's so great to have you here in person. Thank you for being here. So, as I understand, the suspect was arrested Tuesday. Where are we at in the legal process?
Well, hi there, Jake. Great to be here. And yes, this is a very disturbing case and really has gotten now international attention just for the past several weeks. And President Biden, as you mentioned, mentioning this last week after the story had already gone viral. The latest with the case is that this suspect, 27 years old, Gerson Fuentes, he has been arrested and charged. He was arraigned yesterday in Columbus, Ohio. Police say that he confessed to raping and impregnating this 10-year-old girl. A judge ordered him held on $2 million bail at this point, Jack.
Obviously we're in this moment where the legal reality is that women and now it turns out children all across this country cannot get access to abortion care if they need it. What do we know about the child's situation now? Do you have any sense of that?
Well, the child obviously has remained anonymous at this point. Just for some context here, a couple of weeks ago, earlier this month, the Indianapolis Star newspaper first reported on this child, citing a single source, this OBGYN. And it was after that the case went viral. President Biden, making it a point to mention it in his speech last week. Following that, many Republicans began to cast doubt on this story. And earlier in the week, from the Wall Street Journal editorial board to the Republican Attorney General in Ohio, they all began to say that there was doubt to the story, that they did not believe it. Since the arrest became public, they've spent much of the day trying to walk that back or, trying to deflect attention to other parts of this case. For example, that the suspect, according to police, does appear to be an undocumented immigrant. And that's what Republicans are trying to focus on at this point. But many of them have not apologized for casting doubt on this young girl's story in the first place.
It is such a complex and dark, honestly, moment that we seem to be in, and it's exemplified in this case. And, as I understand, the Indiana Attorney General is, in fact, investigating the OBGYN that you mentioned.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about
Certainly.
that.
Well, again, and as you said, very dark, very complex. It's just the Indiana Attorney General at this point, also a Republican, is now questioning this OBGYN that was cited originally by the Indianapolis Star, claiming that this OBGYN did not report the procedure and also claiming that she somehow may have violated HIPAA by talking about this case in the first place, although, of course, she did not mention the 10-year-old girl's name or anything like that. The OBGYN has responded late yesterday. She's kind of stayed out of the limelight for the past couple of weeks, but she did put up a tweet essentially saying, and you see it right there on your screen, "My heart breaks for all survivors of sexual assault and abuse. I'm so sad that our country is failing them when they need us most. Doctors must be able to give people the medical care they need when and where they need it."
This is the thing that I've been hoping to ask you, because I know that, for a living, you have made a career looking at the aftermath of crime and how the suspects are, arrested and prosecuted. I mean, you look at this stuff for a living, and I'm wondering if for you, is it all disorienting to see a story that seems like such a good and evil, a very binary case morally, get caught up in this weird national political moment we are in? What is that like for you?
And there has been division in this country, not just for the last several years, but really for decades. But the abortion issue really brings it out like nothing else. This is a case that has been used by, supporters of abortion rights and those that oppose abortion. And it's almost, you're not even paying attention to the facts anymore. Everyone goes into their different, camps. With this case, according to the court documents and according to the arraignment yesterday, the child and the family first reported the rape last month. The child then traveled on June 30th to Indiana to get the abortion. But it was only until this week that the police actually served the warrant and got the DNA swab after the president has made this comment. Now, there is still no end, it seems, to both sides about this. And it is troubling to see on such a, at the center of this is a 10-year-old girl.
A child.
Child.
That's right.
And she now is at the center of this ugly, ugly political debate.
Gabe Gutierrez helping us understand the disorienting case here of a 10-year-old girl trying to get the care she needs. Thank you so much for being here. Turning now to the record-breaking heat we've been seeing this week across the U.S. Triple-digit temperatures are expected to last through the weekend, especially in the southwest region of the country. And the United States is not the only one sweating it out. Spain and Portugal both broke records today with the mercury soaring above 106 degrees. The heat there is not expected to let up until early next week. And here's the thing, the human body can't take that much of this, and it simply cannot work a full day outside in this heat. That can damage whole economies. And joining us now is Marshall Burke. He's an associate professor in the Department of Earth Systems Science at Stanford University. He has studied this. Professor Burke, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So I want to hear, first of all, about this sort of limit that heat puts on economies, simply because the human body cannot function outside in 106-degree temperatures for all this time. Tell us a little bit about your work. What have been some of your fundamental findings when it comes to that?
Yeah, so the relationship between climate broadly and economic performance has been studied by a lot of researchers, including myself. And what we see over and over, whether we look at individuals, whether we look at firms, whether we look at entire economies, we see that when temperatures get really hot, productivity often suffers. I think this is intuitive on some level. Just think about your own productivity when it gets hot. Maybe you're, just less likely to go into work. You kick off early. You're less productive. Now magnify that by millions of people across entire economies that are exposed to hotter temperatures, and what you get and what you see in the statistics, even in measures like gross domestic product, is you see lower output, lower productivity, in months or in years that are hotter than average.
And if I understand you correctly, basically heat and the rising temperatures we're going to see each summer as the climate continues to change really puts a specific brake on productivity. I guess I'm wondering, have you arrived at a specific temperature past which GDP will begin to suffer in each country?
There's no specific threshold below which you're okay and above which you're really in trouble. What we see in the data is as it gets hotter, productivity declines, and those effects get larger and larger the hotter it gets. And this is true not just for economic productivity, but for other things we care about in the world. People's health shows a very similar relationship. So it gets hotter and hotter. Many different health outcomes worsen and worsen. We see more heart attacks. We see more early deaths, unfortunately. We see more suicides. We see more violent crime. So it's not just the productivity of our economies, it's our livelihoods that are affected in many different ways, more and more as the temperature increases.
I think that there's become this sort of offhand conversation about moving north. I live in California. We talk about that all the time. If I just move north, it'll somehow be more comfortable. And listening to you speak, I think about countries in which average temperatures are on, over the course of the year, lower on average. I guess I'm wondering, do you think that a country in, let's say, Scandinavia or the far north of Canada, where GDP, do you think GDP could in some way survive longer even as the climate gets hotter, whereas countries closer to the equator will suffer disproportionately?
That's a great question. So we actually see clear evidence of this in the historical data. If you're a very northern latitude country, so again, think of Scandinavia, which you mentioned, Canada, Russia, Iceland, we see pretty clear evidence that these economies sometimes do a bit better in years that are warmer on average. And again, this is pretty intuitive. They're starting out very cold. And as you warm a little bit, many types of economic activity are more likely, are more productive. So indeed, we do find evidence that if you're really cold to start with, you actually could see small benefits from at least small amounts of warming. Now that needs to be balanced against all the other things that are going to happen globally as the climate warms. And as you alluded to, we might see large-scale movements of people. And indeed, this is what we've seen throughout the world, and maybe particularly in Europe over the last decade. We've seen large-scale migration into Europe, much of which has been driven by a changing climate, right? So even if you're in a northern latitude country that might locally benefit a little bit, you are going to be dealing with climatic stress globally that's now going to be on your doorstep, right? So I think no country will be immune from these effects.
It is extraordinary to imagine countries where the heat continues to rise, in fact, migrating north and affecting countries where, on average, the temperatures are lower. That is an extraordinary thing to imagine, a future to imagine. If I'm thinking about that future and I'm thinking about any way to try to offset these effects, what can we do? Is there some sort of adjustment to U.S. infrastructure that we could make? Is obviously, the hope is that we reverse the effects of climate change, but on the ground, is there anything that a country can do to prepare for what you're describing?
Yeah, there's two things we need to do. One is get climate change under control, right? That's the broad scale mitigation that we need to do, both domestically and globally. But even if we do that, we're likely to see another degree or two at least of warming, right? And so, as you said, we need to, as a society, figure out how to adapt, how to deal with that warming. And there's lots we can do. So we need to come up with economic systems that shield people's incomes and their livelihoods when the climate takes a turn for the worse. This is social safety net programs that we have in this country and could expand, and likewise need to do that elsewhere in the world. We can also do things very locally. So when we get these protracted heat waves, like we're going to get right now in the Midwest and over the next week, we need to help people stay cool, literally stay cool. So we need cooling centers. We need to inform them of the need to stay cool. We need to give them places to go if they don't have those places already. And research has shown that those things can be pretty effective if we're able to get to all the vulnerable people who need those resources.
Professor Marshall Burke of Stanford University, the connection between the human body, climate change, and the economy. Amazing. Thank you for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, the world population could hit 8 billion by this November, with some countries shouldering a large portion of those numbers. We'll break all of that down coming up. Earlier this week, we told you about the world population hitting a new milestone. The UN predicts that 8 billion people will live on this planet by November 15th. That's more than 3 times what it was in 1950. By the end of the decade, the population could grow by another 500 million people. By 2050, over 9.7 billion and well over 10 billion by the turn of the next century. So which countries are driving the world's population growth? Well, according to the same UN report, more than half of the growth until 2050 will come from a handful of countries. Countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Nigeria, Pakistan, Tanzania, and the Philippines. Joining us now to help us understand this is John Wilmoth. He's the director of the Population Division at the United Nations. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about the trajectory we're going to see here. It looks as if we are going to continue to rise in the near term. Will we then plateau? Will it come back? What do we think the long term looks like?
Yeah, well, the main takeaway of this report, or one of the main takeaways, is that the global population continues to grow. That's true. But that growth is slowing down. And we've seen a gradual slowdown. The peak rate of population growth was around 1970, when the global population was growing at about 2% per year. And now we've fallen below 1% in 2020. And that will continue to go down. And we expect that by the 2080s, growth will hit zero. We will reach a peak population size, and probably the human population will never go above that.
Wow.
Is what we expect.
Help me understand, why would that be? Why is it slowing down?
Well, it's slowing down because, I mean, first of all, why was it growing? Because we've been in this era of growth. Right. You know, this is unusual in human history. It's not common that human populations grow at 1% and 2% per year consistently over a long period of time. And so what has caused that is something that we call the demographic transition, which is basically a transition towards longer lives and smaller families. So it's kind of toward a modern world that we're all kind of used to.
A world in which there's family planning, where there's technology for life saving.
Yes.
All these factors come together and both slow growth, but also shrink because it's shrinking families.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it drives growth because the reduction of mortality and keeping people alive longer, that just means there are more people. And especially that was true with children. The children were so likely to die before they would reach adulthood. And so, you know, the first gains in terms of reducing mortality affected children and youth. And so we had more children surviving to adulthood and then having children of their own. And therefore that would drive population growth.
Right.
So, you know, it's the drop in mortality that starts this process of population growth. And then what brings it to a close is the reduction of the birth rate, you know, reduction of fertility rates, average numbers of children per woman. Once that falls to around 2, then you get zero growth eventually.
So what's so interesting to me about this, though, is that by 2080, right, we hit that zero growth moment, but it is not as if that zero growth will be evenly distributed around the planet, right?
No.
We're talking here about some countries, I would assume, shouldering a much heavier population burden than others. Am I right about that?
Well, I mean, there'll be differences in size, and some are going to grow much more between now and then. Like Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, we expect that the population will double in size between now and 2050.
Wow.
So it's going to become a much larger percentage of the total population in the world.
I mean, I'm thinking about cities like Lagos, Nigeria, which is already a jam-packed environment. That is a very, very big city. But you're talking here about that continent doubling in size. Those cities will become enormous.
Yeah, that's true. There will be more of these megacities, is what we anticipate. But you know, a very important thing to understand is that the whole world is going through this similar process of this demographic transition towards longer lives and smaller families. It's just that the timing is very different. For Europe and North America, this process, you know, was finished by 1950. It was, whereas for the rest of the world, it really started in the middle of the 20th century in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So as a result, and then even within those parts of the world, you know, Asia and Latin America moved very quickly through this process in the latter half of the 20th century. And sub-Saharan Africa in particular is really going through this process now. And so that's where most of the growth is occurring and will occur over the next few decades. But all parts of the world are going through the same process. So that's why we expect that, you know, it's going to come to an end. Because we've observed this in a lot of countries and we've seen what's happened, like in Japan, where this process is very well advanced and the country is declining in size. China is going to start declining in size next year.
That is unimaginable to me. That is really amazing. That is really amazing. So when I think then about climate change and how it interacts with what you found here, we were speaking earlier in the show with an economist who was describing the vast shifts in population due to climate change, people moving away from increasingly hot places to cooler places. Do we know anything about your findings in the context of climate change and how it may force people to move around the planet?
Well, I'm not sure I completely agree with the previous speaker about that. I was listening to him in the green room. But as far as how many people are moving currently as a result of climate change, it's not clear that. I mean, he mentioned the massive movements to Europe in recent years, but those were driven much more by refugee situations.
Political situations.
Yeah, by political situations that were driving people out. I mean, climate is going to be one of several factors that influence whether people stay where they are or whether they move. It's not going to be the only factor. It's going to be one of many things that people weigh. And I think it's going to be difficult in many cases to say that somebody is clearly, you know, a climate migrant as opposed to an economic migrant.
But certainly we could imagine that people are not simply going to stay static in the places they are right now. We're going to see a world that's going to follow this trajectory you're describing, and there will be some movement.
Movement north. I think he's right. I mean, the mention of that. I think Russia and Canada probably have some very valuable real estate.
And tell me for a moment, just when you, as an expert in this, think about 2080, a moment of zero growth, what opportunity does that give the human species, do you think, at that time? Can we somehow get our arms around problems that have eluded us before now? Is there something about stable population that's going to help?
Well, I think it's going to help in terms of reducing the impact that the human population is having on the global environment. The problem is that we need changes in the next 3 decades. You know, we can't wait till 2080s. And we cannot count on slowing the population growth as a means to solve those problems. We have to look at what individuals are doing on average. You know, what's the average consumption? What is the average emission of greenhouse gases and so forth? And that's where we have to focus our attention over the next 3 decades. There's very little that we can do to slow the growth of the human population over the next 3 decades.
Right.
But if you start and then it accumulates over a few generations, then you can have more of an impact. You can slow what we anticipate for the latter half of the century. But there's very little you can do over the next 3 decades. And that's when we really need movement, improvements to kind of address the climate issue. And so it has to come from other things. And I think that's a very important message.
That is very fascinating. John Wilmoth with some really interesting insights about the coming generations. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Still to come, there are only 35 known self-portraits of Vincent van Gogh in the entire world. And now there's one more. An amazing discovery on the back of a Van Gogh painting. That's what we think before we go. Art conservators at the National Galleries of Scotland uncovered a secret hidden inside of Van Gogh's 137-year-old painting, Head of a Peasant Woman. An X-ray examination of the piece revealed an artist's self-portrait on the back, which has been covered by a piece of cardboard for more than a century. The gallery says experts are working to remove the cardboard and layers of glue without damaging the piece. Joining me now is Nina Siegel, cultural writer with the New York Times. Nina, thanks so much for being here.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So this was, what, one piece of art, and now it is two. How did they figure that out?
So it began as a regular examination of the painting in preparation for an exhibition. They took an X-ray of the work, which hadn't been X-rayed previously, and they found that in the X-ray it revealed that there was a painting underneath. And what they suspect is that it's a self-portrait that Van Gogh painted on the backside of the same canvas that he used to paint the original portrait.
Wow. And is it possible, using the science of art restoration, to get down to it? Could we get that painting out into the oxygen and light in some way?
I think they can, but the question is, right now it's covered with a piece of cardboard, basically. And so someone essentially took this painting and stuck a piece of cardboard on the back of it, on top of it, and now they have to take it off. It's got glue in between. And so what you have to do is remove that top layer of cardboard without damaging the painting in the process. And we don't know what kind of condition the original painting is in. It might be in very good condition, but it's going to take restorers a little bit of time to figure out how to get that cardboard off the top of it.
I feel like a gaudy American asking this question, but I can't help but ask it. I mean, Van Gogh, on its own, just the painting that we understood it to be, that must have been valuable enough. I would imagine that suddenly having a whole second painting on the back of it will increase the value of this tremendously.
These kinds of works really have, no price. They're priceless, essentially. But we do know that the last time a self-portrait came up at auction at Christie's in 1998, because they don't come off very often, it sold for $71.5 million. And that is just the self-portrait. So here, if you have two paintings on one canvas, which of course can be displayed, open so that you can see both of them, it's very hard to estimate the price, but of course it's going to be astronomical. And the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam owns 5 similar works, probably painted at the same period when he was in Paris, where he reused canvases several times. So those are on display here in Amsterdam, where I live. And yeah, there's no putting a price on them at all. They're museum works, right, and they won't come up for auction.
And how uncommon is it to bump into an entirely new work by somebody as well known as this artist? I mean, does this happen very often? This must have shaken the art world, I assume.
There are frequently claims of new Van Gogh discoveries, and also we find there are frequently drawing discoveries, and self-portraits are much rarer. of course. And I should emphasize that this is not necessarily confirmed so far because nobody's actually seen it. We just see it from an X-ray. So the experts who have examined it feel quite confident that it's a new discovery. And we'll have to wait and see once we get to look at the real painting, whether it can be confirmed. But I think it's very likely, given the fact that it fits into this pattern that Van Gogh had, and it's also obviously clearly an original Van Gogh on the other side of the painting. It's unlikely that someone could have gotten an original Van Gogh and then painted a fake on the back, of course.
Right.
But then there's also the issue that, and then, but the other issue is going to be, is it really a self-portrait? It definitely looks like a self-portrait. It appears very much like the other self-portraits that were made in this period as well. So, but there's not that much you can tell, I think, from the X-ray. It's a black and white image, as you can see. It's a bit shadowy, but it does bear very similar resemblances to other self-portraits he made with the beard, the way he's turned, his hat on.
I mean, for you as someone who looks at this stuff for a living, is it it's an emotional thing, right? I feel like this sort of ghost out of the past. It reminds me of the feelings that I have when there are, shipwrecks discovered, right? This feeling of something new coming from the past. It's a very powerful thing, I think, emotionally. Do you have that response too?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reason that Van Gogh speaks to so many people is that there is an emotionality to his self-portraits, and we see him so much. I mean, many artists, there's a handful of artists who did many self-portraits, like Rembrandt and Frida Kahlo, Picasso. And so those artists we tend to feel closer to. But what Van Gogh did was he really gave us a sense of his internal life, and some people feel that's his internal turmoil and his emotional response to the world, especially the way he uses his brush strokes. It has a lot of tension in it, and it has a lot of movement in it. And so we do feel close to Van Gogh because we see him, we feel his angst, we feel his intensity. And I think that's why people are so fascinated by these self-portraits and why a new discovery is so fascinating to people.
I mean, as you say, his interior landscape now sort of unearthed from the interior of this piece of art. Really amazing. Nina Siegel of the New York Times, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for making time for us. Until we meet again, I'm Jake Ward. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.